Captain Dean Show.
Welcome back to part 2 of Nate's Squire Jaguar base restoration video. I actually had to think about that. I wasn't prepared. I didn't have my notes in front of me. I'm a little bit under the weather, but I'm going to push through and make this video because I only have a couple of topics to go over. Pardon me if I sneeze a couple of times and have to blow my nose. I'll keep these close by over here on the side. So, as I mentioned in the first video, there have been a couple of times where I did some Jaguars for myself, and thank goodness there are some people out there on YouTube that have posted videos about how to do things like this. So this particular video is going to be pretty short and sweet, just to get a couple of things out of the way. The first thing I learned when I got his custom-made pick guard is that it doesn't necessarily match up perfect with the original. It's a little bit tighter, and it might be hard to show it on camera, but I have a Dremel tool. You can have a Dremel tool, or you can use like just a basic file. But what happens is, of course, the custom-made one might be more for like a fender and not a Squire. So what I learned pretty early on, because I messed up one really bad one time because I was an idiot and not paying attention. All you do is you line up the pick guard, the original pick guard, I put it on top, and then I just line it up into the neck pocket area. And so what I'll do is I'll tape that down on the sides so that when I take a Dremel tool, I'll have an exact cutout of where I need to go and how far I need to go. So you're kind of turning the original one into a template to use to cut out what you need on this one. A couple of years ago, when I started to do some deeper dives into restoration or customizing my own guitars, what I discovered is that when you order a pick guard, it doesn't always fit like Cinderella's slipper. So in this case, let me see if I can prop this neck up a little bit here. There we go. Nothing like a hot pink toolbox to help me out. So what you'll see is that the original pick guard will fit perfectly around the neck. Obviously, every time I work on a Squire, they seem to have different things about them. So in this case, I learned pretty early on that this one it's a little bit tighter up in here. So really all I'll have to do to this one won't require as much as the previous ones I've done in the past, is I'll shave just a little bit off of this top piece right here. So I've had this file for quite a long time, and it's come in handy when I started doing guitar work on things just like this. It's so easy, and in this case I may not even have to tape it. All I have to do is hold this in place where the neck pocket is, and then I can just see right there just a little bit of shaving. And luckily anything on the inside of the guitar neck usually gets covered up anyway. The neck will do a good job of that. So hold it down, slide this in place, and now that little area, which you probably can't see right here, is now fitting much better. Now the other thing I learned about these pick guards is that they do not line up with the holes that were originally drilled out for these things, and if you put them side by side, there's some that aren't even close. And of course this part is completely different. So anyway, that's really all I had to do. On other ones I've had, it was a much more detailed thing to do. But in this case, all I have to do is just shave a very, very small fraction of this little area here. And then that should pretty much do it. As long as it goes around the neck, it's good, but it wasn't sitting flush up here. It almost had like a bulge like right here. This is the part of the video that people usually fast forward.
So I'm happy with that. That seems like one.
The other thing I can do while I have this in place is quite crucial. So as you can see, this was a standard P pickup with the top and bottom going that direction. A Mark Hoppus, of course, is inverted, so it goes small to big like that. It's as if you're flipping the pick guard up. So I no longer need that one. I will take my handy pink toolbox kit again. And this is where things get interesting. All I have to do is take a marker and pretty much draw out the pick guard, pickup area around the pick guard. I'll just trace out the shape of what it needs to be. Obviously that's where the pickups will go. So now that I have that in place, this part is very simple for me. When you have the layout of where they go, which is right there, all I have to do is do a solid cutout around that. So you'll give it a little bit of breathing room. Instead of it being cut to there, I'll cut it over to about yay far. So probably right about there. And so it's easy to take, let me move all this out of the way. It's easy to go off of the original cut here, and I'll just kind of go off of that, and I'll go out to where that line is and just kind of give it a solid drawing. And with the same thing down here, you can kind of just go off of the original cut and then just mark it out. In this case, I'll have to go a little bit lower just to make sure the pickups fit. So I'll probably go down to that point. And again, it's not that this is perfect or anything. It's just more about knowing exactly the general turf idea of where I'm going to be going. And that is pretty much all I'm going to need. Now, I know there are fancy tools out there and things that people have to do routing and cutting out, and they do a perfect cutout of that area. Well, I use caveman tools. I am not a professional woods worker. I am not a professional wood shop guy. In fact, I got a D in wood shop when I was in junior high. So I do not have those tools or abilities to do these types of things. So what I do is I take a drill bit and I just basically turn this into Swiss cheese. I'll go around the perimeter and then I'll just start going inside and just drilling holes. I'll turn that into Swiss cheese, and then I take a chisel and I'll just basically chip it out, and then with a chisel and sandpaper I can flatten it down to pretty much be exactly what this is, and that's it. That's all I have to do. Alright, so I've got the variety of sizes. I've actually used this size in the past, but I think today I'm going to go with the bigger one. That way I can get much bigger holes drilled out and maybe have to do less chiseling. Lay that flush onto that, like so, and then wrap it around, and that will be my marker of how far to drill down. The other reason I do this first is because I can take all of the wood chips and sawdust that comes out of drilling this out and shove it into this J pickup pocket cavity. So I'll use the wood chips, the dust, and epoxy to fill this place, and I also have to fill in probably about that much of this area. I have to fill all that in. So by drilling this out first, it's a great way to get started on that. So here you go. Alright, so that's the perimeter of it, and then I can just go buck wild in here. Alright, so that is how I do that. So basically, if you get all the chips and stuff out of the way, basically I just turn it into like a honeycomb, and then you can just break apart these chunks here. But I get a little handheld chisel for that. I'll use the chisel and a little hammer and just kind of flatten all that out to where it's level with the original pickup cavity area that is right here. So before I start getting on that, I'll just take this bowl, which is a beautiful bowl made by Bark Camp Pottery. My good friend Brandon made this for me, and as beautiful as it is to eat ice cream and soup out of, I actually have been using this since I got it from him for all my guitar projects. So basically I'll dump out the dust into this bowl, get as much out of there as I can, and this is an excellent way to have plenty of dust, sawdust, wood chips, however you want to word it, to do what I need to do to fill these cavities up. But what really comes in handy, especially in the cavity part, the jazz pickup part, are these chunks. I like to use these thick chunks that break off, and you shove those in there, and that really solidifies the hardening of filling that up with pretty much the same wood. The guitar itself is just being taken out of here and moved over there. Alright, so this is the chisel tool that I have, just a standard handheld chisel, and pretty much just start at the edge, give it a little tap there, and just kind of get that started. And there you go. That's when you start getting those chunks out of there. Get all that dust out, and now I have a better view of what I'm needing to keep working on. This is how they built the pyramids, right? I did as best I could with a drill and chisel to get this squared out here so that the pickup will fit in this area. And now I just need to clean this area up, and basically I just kind of go around the sides and try to level everything out by using the remaining chisel, and I do some sandpaper. It ain't pretty, but it does the job. That's what she said. It's not about perfection. As long as the floor is level with this area, which it pretty much is, that's all that matters to me. And the funny thing about when I do stuff like this, if people think I'm destroying and ruining a guitar, you can revert this back to a regular Jaguar bass with the original pickguard, because the original pickguard will cover all that area up anyway. You can fill it in with wood filler and epoxy if you wanted to. You can take this chunk out. Once I put this in, you can knock that down and put the original pickguard back on. That is not the problem. When somebody wants to convert, especially a Squier guitar into a Blink 182 guitar, Mark Hoppus basses are easy to replicate. You can either do it with all the fancy tools, or you can be a caveman like me and use a drill, a chisel, a hammer, and some sandpaper, and you basically just get what you need done and out of the way, so that when you're ready to install everything, it fits. It's perfect. And the goal of making a Mark Hoppus replica bass is that it will be something that lasts permanently, and hopefully pass hands to a Blink 182 fan as the years go on. So now, obviously, I have plenty of what I need, and this is what I talked about at the beginning of the video. Put that in there and pour epoxy in there and let that set for a little bit. You still got some room up here. And then before I finish it off, I'll take a lot of these wood chips and stuff that came out of the drill bit, and I'll sprinkle that over the top with some epoxy on top of that. And then when it comes to sanding it down, you're pretty much sanding down the wood of the bass anyway. So the sanding with the epoxy mixture, it actually goes pretty smooth with all of that. All right, I took my tablecloth outside to shake it off. I got all the wood bits and dust I needed out of it. I've put the pick guard on and just kind of put my fingers in these corner areas of the neck pocket, so I can see that there's plenty of room underneath here for the pickups to go. They're not going to be hitting any walls or anything like that to cause any problems. So we are good to go on that. Something a lot of people don't think about when they make a Mark Hoppus bass, especially on these Jaguar basses, the pickguard for a Mark Hoppus does not go all the way down to cover up the cavity of where the original plate was. So a Jaguar bass has a plastic pickguard here and a metal plate here, very much like a jazz bass. It's literally the same thing. So what I do is I draw a line where this pickup or this pickguard is going to fall, which will be right about there. And I basically do a marker on this thing so that I understand where it's going to be going. And you could do other things, and I might do tape if I want to, but basically I just get a rough idea of where this is going. So right there, and then it curves up. So the trick to this is, for me, what works good is, again, the epoxy works really good for me. It's something I picked up on in one of the first videos I ever watched. There was a guy in England that filled the jazz pickup cavity with epoxy, just straight epoxy, and then he sanded it down, and it works like wood filler. I think it might even be better than wood filler. I took that same idea and took it to this area when I first started doing the Jaguar basses. So this is a great concept of what works for me, and you can just basically get a sense of that curving there and filling it. So you're basically you just need to fill this area. But the trick to it is you have to have enough wood filler and everything in that area in order for this bolt to go into it. It has to be able to be screwed into, and that again plays a big role in the epoxy being mixed with wood chips. The wood chips will help do a pre-drill so that a screw can go in and out of that. And when it comes to making these also, instead of using a regular length screw that goes into a pick guard, I find one that's just a little bit longer so that it will go deeper in there and really hold that down, because you're going to be pulling the input jack all the time when you're plugging the cord in and taking it out. So you want something that's going to be durable, because it's just that one hole. There's no two on this side, like the two are up here, and so it's just this one hole that has to hold that down so that you're not yanking it out all the time. That's what she said. So all I do is I get toothpicks and I build like a little dam out of them, and it seems to work really well for me. There's always a few that are different in size, so I get one row straightened out. Basically, I just put tape on it. So, cover that area there. Got that curvature on it. Like that. And there you go. The toothpicks pretty much go right up to that point. I can actually move it up just a little bit higher if I want to. Maybe right about there. Alright, now it's right where I had it earlier. That much of the pick guard is underneath that area. So all of that will get filled in and have the epoxy underneath it. And wood chips, of course. And that will hold it down in place for good. And then all of this opening here will get filled in and sanded down, as well as the jazz pickup area. How am I going to get the ground wire through the new covered area? A bendy straw, of course. Okay, so in this instance, there were some holes from the old pick guard that were a little bit further over from where the new one's going to be going, which is pretty much right on the edge of this. So I did the old trick of putting toothpicks glued into these holes, and I just went ahead and filled all of them. That way I can just sand it down smooth and putty all that up and just have a smooth body all around before I install the new pick guard onto it. In the past, I've learned from my mistakes. I would buy one of these, but this time I bought two. I also learned, by the way, thanks to my local Ace Hardware. Ace is the place with the helpful hardware, folk. On, I think, that base, I used black epoxy, and that was a big no-no. It puffs up and it stinks, and it's just not good for what I was doing. Clear epoxy is the way to go. So this is Gorilla clear epoxy, and I bought 2 tubes because, again, I have to not only fill the jazz pickup cavity, I have to fill this little area down here. So the first time I ever used the epoxy was quite an eye-opening experience to learn from. I just kind of injected it into the area, and that was really not the right way to go about doing it. So I've gotten better at stuff like this. If you've never used this stuff, I'll give you a quick little lesson on how to use it properly, at least based on how I use it. So this is the stirring stick that comes inside. It's in between the two canister handle thing. I'm really not good with words. As you can tell, I'm still not feeling 100%. So when I talk, people don't listen. I am not E.F. Hutton. So you remove this little paddle from inside here. This is how you stir the epoxy. What I learned is you want to use something easy and plastic and small so that you can get out of it what you need. You can stir it, have it ready. It sets very quick, so you got to be quick when you use this stuff. And it's also a little bit easier to use these cups because these little shot cup things that they were in our kitchen. I can't remember exactly why they were purchased, but they came in handy for whatever they were. And then ever since then, I've used them to basically fill epoxy on every one of these bass guitars I have. I guess I'll do the jazz pickup cavity first. It seems to be the thing I'm used to doing the most. You want to wash your hands as soon as you get done with this stuff. So both sides come out. I'll go about halfway down and stop, and then I'll put the plug back on it. Stir it up real good, and it just kind of turns into a clear liquid. You just pour it in. You can also use this to slop it around in there. Take the wood chips, try to get as many of these thicker pieces down here that I can fit without them sticking up too far. And that just helps get a bulk in there, and you don't have to use as much epoxy. Stir that up some more, and then just pour it in there like concrete. Try to get as much of that in there as possible. Get that mixed up real good. And that's where you get a lot of the filament in the open areas and stuff, to really lock that down. And then here comes the sawdust. This is something I discovered with the last two that I did. This is what helped me really get it right. You just pack that in as tight as you can. And then when you start doing the painting and the sanding and the painting, you can take just small amounts of wood putty, and it really gives you everything you need. All right, so it's the next day. The epoxy has set, and here I am. So what happened, this area down here, it got, it kind of sunk down a little bit. So the wood chips are there, and it's solid. It's very solid, like concrete. That will just get a little bit of topping of wood filler. I do use wood filler. I think I failed to mention this earlier. Wood filler is something I use on occasion. It's to basically fill the screw holes and small things, but the epoxy is what I like to use to fill like a giant opening, which is what these pretty much call for. Also, the epoxy in the Jazz pickup actually rose up like a biscuit. So what happens when that, I learned this lesson a long time ago too. Basically, I just have one of these thin saw blades that you would put on one of those hand saws or whatever. And basically, I just lay it flat against the body and just trim the excess off by shaving it down. And it really isn't a whole lot. That's how thick it was. But when you look at it, it wouldn't be flat with the body. And when you start to sand on it, it takes a little bit longer to sand epoxy down. Again, I'm not a man of fancy cuisine and etiquette. I use hand tools. I use sandpaper in my hand. I use little blocks of wood that I have laying around and wrap sandpaper around it to make things flat. I use chisels and hammers and little saw blades, and I'm babbling. When you remove this much of epoxy off of the top of something like that, it really helps on the sanding part. The other thing that happens is because the epoxy's mixed in with some of the wood chips and everything, it's a little lumpy, like my oatmeal. And so by sanding this down or cutting this down with this saw blade, it really gets it flat to the body. But the sandpaper will still come in handy, and I do have like a wood block laying around here somewhere. That's what I wrap sandpaper around so that it's a nice flat hard surface to make sure that this area right here is as flat as the rest of the body. And you're beginning to sand the guitar in general, so by sanding the overall guitar with the addition of these areas being prepped and ready to be covered, it comes in handy for it to be done that way. So here I am right now. It is January. Actually, tomorrow, not tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. This coming Saturday, today's Thursday, this Saturday, we're expecting an enormous winter storm of epic proportion. And so I went to my local Ace hardware store yet again because I knew I was going to need a couple of things just to make sure that I had everything I needed. With the idea of being snowed in and trapped at home, what better reason to work on this bass than that? I need all the tools to make sure I'm ready to do it all. I had some of these laying around, but I went ahead and picked up a couple more of these sanding blocks. I really like these things for what I do because of the curvature of a guitar body. These are like a sponge, and they contort to the body as you're sanding on it. So these come in handy a lot. And my local Ace had this 4-pack. It's coarse and medium, which again comes in handy when you're doing these heavy surfaces. So I picked up one of those, and I got another pack of Gorilla wood filler. I obviously used Gorilla brand on the epoxy, and so I also have been getting Gorilla brand on the wood filler. Gorilla makes great tape, and I'm kind of loyal to brand names. When I find something I like, I tend to stick with it. The wood filler will come in handy to top this area off down here where the body needs to be covered, and get that sanded leveled down. And then there's a couple of areas where when I was doing the saw blade on here, that little chunks of like wood and stuff will come out. So it's not necessarily flush with the body, but the epoxy is locked in and ready to go. And the wood filler will help kind of smooth that surface out. And so when I sand the whole body down, all of that will go smooth as well. Now when it comes to filling in the original input jack, it's kind of an easy process. I basically just put a piece of tape inside this hole to block that. So I fill it up with wood chips and wood sand, and I'll use wood putty on this because it's not super deep. So that'll actually turn out pretty good with wood putty. I actually used wood putty on that base, and it worked out just fine. So I'm going to try it again on this one. Of course, anything like this goes wrong, it sucks, but you can always gut it and just do it again. So that is where I'm at right now. I went ahead and I didn't film this part because it's kind of silly. The other thing was the toothpicks. I glued toothpicks into all of the screw holes. That also, I'll just get a dab of wood putty and go over all of those. So when I sand the body down, it'll be completely smooth all over. There won't be any blemishes that need to be touched up at that point. I've been doing this long enough now that I've gotten pretty good at this, figuring out how to go about doing that stuff. So I just wanted to hop on here real quick and show that the excess of the epoxy got sanded down or sawed off, and now that surface in the jazz pocket area is smooth, and this area here will just get wood putty, and then I'll sand all of it down and it'll turn out really, really good. So that's where we are. If I do get trapped at home, and obviously if I have power, I will be able to have a fully charged phone, and I can plug in and sand and film a lot more of that process. So we're really getting close to the step where it's ready for primer paint. Unfortunately, it's January, and January in Kentucky, as I've said, is not good for painting. I do not have an indoor room that is heated and able to paint in the winter time. So I'll probably have to wait until at least March or maybe even April. But if I'm lucky and February has a streak of days that are 70 degrees, that means my painting room in the garage might be in the 80s, and it's worth a shot. If I can at least get a primer coat on here, then I can just primer this whole thing white and sand it down smooth, and then the surface is prepped and ready for the actual paint job. Which, by the way, as I'm filming this right now, we don't know what that's going to be. The only thing I do know is that the pick guard is a charcoal gray, black marine pearl type pick guard, and we're going to figure out what goes well with that. But until then, eat your Wheaties and fuck off.